Your Magalhaes, who's on Esper Control. Now, Esper Control, not really a new deck, but the way you build it has been new because you can't play cards like Absorb in the deck anymore, which Edgar isn't. Do you feel like that hurts him in this matchup?
So the card Absorb is very good because it's effectively just going to take out 2 spells from the red deck. That 3 life, this is the matchup where that ends up mattering. But he is loading up on some things like Vraska's Contempt, which is going to check Chandra very well. It's going to check Rekindling Phoenix quite well. And then on top of the usual Lyra that we'd expect out of the sideboard, we also see Vona, Butcher
Magan.
Magan, thank you. Out of the sideboard, which is just a Vigilant Lifelinker for 5 that's going to give Edgar some points here post-board.
Yeah, I like instead of these counterspells, he has a lot of kind of your life gain removal. We have Moment of Craving, we have Restless Contempt, we have Oath of Kaya. Maybe that's going to be enough.
Yeah, Oath of Kaya is another one that just is so much game, especially when you consider that each copy of Teferi Time Raveler you have is a, albeit slow, but additional copy of Oath of Kaya, since it can just return your own Oath of Kaya to your hand.
All right, well, let's see this one go to place. This is round number 11 from the X and 2 bracket. Winner should have a pretty good look at the top 8. Loser will still be alive for top 8.
And both of these players, they just really want to get these points. You know, everyone obviously does, but they're so high in standings. And we're getting towards the end of a season that they can't afford to give anything up. Pretty
good blitzing opener here from Harlan. Starts on Gitu, or rather, Fanatical Firebrand. Swings in for 1 and then for another one. Edgar down to 18. Looks like his hand is all creatures and then burn here. None of those high drops as Viashino Pyromancer joins the team. Edgar down to 16. Hoping to end the game really before it starts.
Yeah, and this is the spot where Edgar's going to get a little bit punished for having all of these shock lands in his deck. They can't really afford to have them come in untapped, or you're just doing Harlan's work for him.
3 more in, Edgar down to 13. Harlan no follow-up in hand. Believe he has some burn spells, though, to fire off on the end step. Cry of the Carnarium for Edgar. While Harlan still has a Wizard, he'll cast Wizard's Lightning, and then cast Lightning Strike. Edgar down to 7. Harlan loses the team. But Edgar is tapped out. It's a spot for a land Experimental Frenzy if Harlan has one, and he certainly does.
Oof. Well, so this is a spot that's actually going to be a little bit better for Edgar than it normally would be, because before, without Teferi in your deck, you were just kind of cold if you didn't get to absorb it on the spot. But now there are things that, this was basically a time walk for Edgar.
And what a turn here for Harlan. He picks up that Frenzy, then plays his last cards out are 5th land, Gitu Lava Runner, hey, 2 spells in the graveyard, and the Experimental Frenzy. Edgar down to 5.
Yeah, and this is a spot where rather than going for the Teferi, Harlan just realizes that Teferi's not going to do much for a couple of turns. Let's just, you know, the face is the place.
Here's the other Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, tucking away the Experimental Frenzy. Edgar down to 5, Harlan swinging, Edgar down to 3, and the top deck is Lightning Strike, so that'll do it.
Yeah, that's how you do it sometimes.
I was going to say with him at 5, I was like, man, is Harlan going to attack? He was facing a really tough decision. I was thinking whether or not to attack Hero of Dominaria or not. Of course, when you draw a Lightning Strike, it's not really a decision.
Yeah. There's certainly a point. I think I'm interested in probably going after Teferi in that spot, but putting the opponent in Lightning Strike range when you have Lightning Strike, Skewer the Critics, Wizard's Lightning, and so on, it's really attractive.
Yeah, especially because maybe even if he doesn't top deck the burn spell, you might put your opponent to 3 because Absorb isn't a card that they play anymore. So, you know, then they have to draw some, like maybe Oath of Kaya or something like that.
Yeah, you need those life gain effects in order to pull back out of range, and there aren't as many of them as there used to be.
So just 3 minutes into the round, and we are looking at sideboards. That's what Mono Red can do.
Yeah, I mean, that's why you bring Mono Red, is sometimes you just want to make sure you have time to get lunch between rounds.
So I want to first look at Experimental Frenzy. Harlan cast won that game. Edgar has his 3 copies of Teferi Time Raveler to bounce it, and 1 copy of Mortify, and that is it on dealing with the enchantment. Does he need more answers to compete here? Yeah,
he really wants to make sure that he's bringing other things in. We're probably going to end up seeing something like Duress coming in, because even if it doesn't take something like Experimental Frenzy, gaining the life off of a Lightning Strike may end up being worth it, and then we're going to see Harlan bring in things like Tibalt, Rakish Instigator, Risk Factor, other things that are powerful enough to warrant bringing in Duress, and when you don't have these counter spells, you have to have some way to answer them.
Yeah, a lot of those things, you know, especially Risk Factor, the way these Esper decks are built right now, I really like that style of card right now.
Yeah, that's a card that isn't necessarily the best in your main deck all the time, but you just want to have a bunch of powerful threats to top deck against the Esper control deck because you know they're going to be better suited to just answer everything that you're doing after sideboarding. So you need to make it to where it's harder for them to answer each individual card.
Yeah, Tybalt seems, I know the risk factor seems excellent. Tybalt seems excellent because Edgar doesn't, because he doesn't have counter spells, his way of stabilizing is life gain, and just that passive ability is really powerful.
Right, and we could even see something like Direfleet Daredevil come in here because bringing back a Duress against Esper control is a way to play.
It's not bad. Yeah, he could steal Duress for sure. Even other cards, Vraska's Contempt, stealing back, I'd be pretty interested in that. I don't know if you could ever get to 6 mana to do it, but
well,
you can pull it off.
It's a tough one where you can also bring back Thought Erasure, and a lot of the games that you aren't doing so hot in are going to go a bit longer, and you're inevitably going to draw land, so it just gives you something to do with it. Or it's just a 2-1 earlier in the game, which is not that bad when you just need bodies to apply pressure.
On Edgar's side, his sideboard, a lot. Yeah, that life gain really playing. You mentioned the Vona, Butcher, Magan, 1 Lyra, Dawnbringer. Those are the kind of cards we expect him to move toward. We had Harlan on camera yesterday. Actually did pick up one of his losses against Zachary Keeney. Fell to the white deck of Zachary, but that was one of his only 2 losses that really picked up things since that point.
Yeah, and losing to Zachary Keeney on a white deck is not a bad place to be.
For Harlan Fear, 10 opens this year. He doesn't have a top 8 yet, but still is doing reasonably well in the points race. It kind of shows to him just being very consistent as a member of Team Nova.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's just kind of been on the tour, making his way up, a recent innovator on the Azorius Stoneforge deck in Legacy.
Yeah, a lot of times you'll see, the kind of the Harlan Fear and Kevin Jones style player. They have a style, right? These blue, they like to play kind of like 3-color Jeskai or Izzet style decks or red decks, but rather than building them as tempo decks, a lot of time they're more burn oriented, they're more attack oriented.
Yeah, he's definitely someone who wants to have access to some control aspects, but wants to be able to apply pressure while also answering what the opponent's doing. You can't just sit back on your heels and hope to go over the top. You want something like Geist of St. Traft, a Stoneforge Mystic, to actually make the game over.
Yeah. Successful here with kind of that. The fact that in this metagame he would flex into a mono red deck, not too surprising.
Yeah, he's just really been on the aggro plan right now. He had a top 8 with Bant midrange recently, and even he just thinks that deck isn't very good right now.
For Edgar, he's been on Esper Control. A lot of times we know him as an Amulet Titan player in Modern, but shows range in a lot of formats. Tends to be a player who's drawn toward I would say like long high decision tree decks. So playing Esper in Standard is pretty online.
Yeah, absolutely. And Edgar is just kind of someone who likes to have long-term plans with all of his decks and then execute something that is able to to take a consistent line each time he sits at the table.
Currently, Edgar is 7th in the season race for season 1. Had been in the top 3 at one point. Still hovering. Big finish this weekend could put him into the top 3.
Notable team member of Team Amulet.
Both players have kept Harlan on a 6-card hand. Looks like he has kept a 1-lander, but scryed a land to the top. And again, it's a blitzing play here from Harlan, starting off with Fanatical Firebrand. Got a chance to look at his hand. None of, sometimes post-board we'll see red keep like these robust hands of big cards, but that's not the strategy here.
Sometimes you just want to kill him, and I can respect that.
I'm a big fan.
Why play good cards when opponent can be dead cards?
And a land and a pass. Moment of Craving end step for Edgar. This is interesting. Harlan had Runaway Steamkin, but chose not to develop it into the board.
Yeah, and the idea here is you just don't want to jam it into something like Cry of the Carnarium.
Thought Erasure from Edgar shows the hand. It's Runaway Steamkin, Gitu Lava Runner, Direfleet Daredevil, and Tybalt Rakish Instigator. Yeah, Harlan was really respecting Cry of the Carnarium. with that last play.
Right, and there's also a point where you can expect Edgar to have something like Moment of Craving or Cast Down in hand, right? Edgar chose to keep his hand. He's not just gonna... Edgar's not like a fish who's gonna keep 7 lands against red and hope it works out.
Right.
You don't just want to jam your Runaway Steamkin into a removal spell when Edgar's probably gonna have to bite on the Fanatical Firebrand for mana efficiency's sake.
There's been some time on this decision. And I think he's setting. You talked about his how he likes long-term plans, and I think that really shows. Taking Direfleet Daredevil, it's not a card that Harlan's going to play anytime soon, but it may be the most powerful card in his hand.
And this is a spot where it says a lot about what's going on in Edgar's hand if he doesn't take this Tybalt here.
Yeah, the Tybalt -2, making a double token for Harlan. Land and pass. Remember, no absorbs in the 75, so we're probably looking at removal spells being left up here.
And this is a spot where Edgar likely just wants Harlan to roll down the Tybalt for something like a Cry of the Carnarium to mop everything up.
And Harlan chooses this as the time to develop. Here is Runaway Steamkin into Gitu Lava Runner, and the Devil attacks. And for Edgar, it wasn't even removal, just no plays as he goes back to the untap. And it was Cry of the Carnarium that will cleanly clear things up. No death trigger for the Devil token. Good patience by Edgar.
And Harlan also chose not to activate Tybalt last turn to play into that Cry.
Right. Yeah, he kind of set this up as the follow-up. Say if you have a sweeper, he's going to make Rekindling Phoenix plus Devil token. That's what he has, and that's not too bad.
Big show of patience on Harlan's part.
So force Edgar to have something like a Contempt to deal with the Phoenix. Edgar does not. He does have Teferi, which will plus to draw a card, untaps here, says go.
This doesn't necessarily feel great, but it is going to buy him some time, and Edgar is at 19.
An attack cast down by Edgar will take care of the Phoenix. Teferi down to 4 loyalty. Egg token for Harlan. But Edgar tapping down to 1. Harlan would love to jam something like Experimental Frenzy here if he has it. I think he does. And he does. Here's the powerful enchantment. He's keeping that control deck off balance very well here. Off the top, land 5, and gets the spell off it. A great sequence here for Harlan.
Yeah, Harlan's just attacking from so many angles right now. He's attacking on the battlefield. Edgar wants to protect this Teferi ideally, but also needs to pressure this egg, or Harlan just gets a Phoenix back.
Right, there's so much that Edgar needs to take care of. He has to -3 on the Frenzy, and that's what he'll do. It means the Firebrand, the Teferi is as good as gone here. So there's a Fanatical Firebrand in play.
Yep.
And right now he also has to answer the egg token. So he will Legend Rule away his own Teferi. Makes a second one. That one's going to plus. Plays another land, untaps 2, but right now, on end step, Moment of Cravings away the egg. Okay.
This is a swing, and, Edgar unfortunately doesn't gain the 2 life because of the Tybalt, but, he's still at 19. Right now, they're still kind of fighting over resources more than life total.
And I love this from Harlan. So attacks Teferi for 1 and Edgar for 1 because he wants Spectacle for this light up the stage because he knows there's Experimental Frenzy there. Because it was tucked from the Teferi. Beautiful line from Harlan.
Ooh, and then he didn't cast this light up the stage last turn.
Right.
This is great on Farrah's part.
Yeah. So he gets that into play. That Lightning Strike that's exiled, he can still cast it. It's not in his hand. And Edgar, last turn he dealt with a Phoenix and a Frenzy, and now he has to do it again.
Yeah, this is just so much for him to have to deal with. And you can see it in the body language where he's just trying to figure out how he gets himself out of this. His back's against the wall.
Right, you feel like, you have to -3 the Frenzy again, and then you're going to lose the Teferi. It's not great.
Yeah, you're at the spot where you go, do I roll up my Teferi and just hope to get lucky? What am I more likely to get lucky with my Teferi roll up? Or am I more likely to win if I tuck the Frenzy?
I think either the calculus is right that -3ing the Teferi just doesn't win, so might as well draw a card and hope something changes. But this is not a good spot for Edgar.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't feel good, but there's also just a spot where you need a card advantage engine to keep up with what the red deck is doing.
Right. Upkeep Wizard's Lightning on the Teferi. It's down to 2. Harlan draws for turn. It checks top card. Still has a Lightning Strike he can use. He's going to attack. We'll see whether it goes at Edgar or at the Planeswalker. We'll have to main phase this Lightning Strike that's off in exile if he doesn't want to lose it. So Teferi down, 3 damage upstairs, Edgar to 15.
was a pretty fair experimental frenzy turn, all things considered.
Yeah, I was going to say, right? He only played one bonus card?
Yeah. It wasn't even a bonus card. I guess he drew a card, but the card barely counts, you know?
Yeah. He only played one card. It was almost like fair magic. This one, land off the top. G2 Lava Runner off the top. That has haste. Yeah, this is one of the less... we talked about what fair turns look like. This isn't it. Here's Direfleet Daredevil.
Oh, my.
What does Edgar have in the graveyard? How about Thought Erasure? He'll cast Thought Erasure.
That card's pretty good with Experimental Frenzy.
Yeah. Oh, Surveil 1? That seems decent. In response, Edgar will Vraska's Contempt away the Tybalt.
Gets to gain the 2 life on this one.
Yeah, does get the 2, with how the resolution works here. Surveils over on a second Experimental Frenzy. Edgar's hand just lands. Here's an attack. It's for 4, Edgar to 13. One more turn of frenzying here, and that might just close it out.
Yeah, Edgar's just fallen so far behind on resources because this Experimental Frenzy has represented, 6 cards or something?
You just can't keep up with it as a control deck. I mean, you have a lot of great card draw, but like Teferi only draws 1 card per turn. Search can only be activated once per turn, and that is not enough against this enchantment.
Right, and okay, so Edgar found a copy of Search for Azcanta. If there's a way for him back into this game, it's going to involve one of his card advantage engines.
Okay, upkeep, Harlan's going to cast Risk Factor.
Enjoy your 3 cards in hand that will hopefully never be cast.
Yeah, I mean, right, you have to give him the 3 cards. Now the problem is, if we get to a point that the Experimental Frenzy is answered, Harlan has a 7-card hand.
Yeah.
But, don't worry about it. That's so far in the future. 1 turn at a time.
Yeah, it's rough. You're just at the point where you got to answer what's on the battlefield and worry about that later.
A swing in for 6. Edgar is down to 7. Transforms his Azcanta. Land and Lyra Dawnbringer.
Okay.
This is the play. If there is a way for Edgar to stabilize, this might be it.
Yeah, this does it. This is the way back into the game for Edgar.
Harlan now's going to do some counting. He has 4 mana up and a 7-card grip. If those 7 cards in hand win from here and remove the Lyra, he might get rid of the Frenzy.
Oof. And, we see a Viashino Pyromancer, maybe 2 of them in there, so that gets him a lot of the way.
Yeah, it might be good enough. Edgar, no cards in hand, just that Azcanta. Looks like he's going to jumpstart the Risk Factor instead. Decides to keep Experimental Frenzy, discarding Chandra. In response, top 4, it's Moment of Craving for Edgar. Can he afford to give Harlan... He just has to give Harlan 3 more cards,
He likely just gives him the cards, because there's a point where if your opponent has a ton of cards in hand, you mentioned, oh no, Harlan will have 7 cards in hand, but if you put him up to 10 cards in hand, there's a point where it's more looting than it is actually drawing more cards.
So let's count it out. If Edgar goes down, he could shrink, let's say the Fanatical Firebrand, go to 9, then take Risk Factor damage, go to 5. He's got to think here, if he does that, is he going to get another untap? And I think the answer is that's just too risky.
Probably not.
Yeah.
That's what the Risk Factor is.
He will shoot down the Firebrand, wants to get that one while it's tapped. Edgar up to 9. Hoping that Lyra Dawnbringer can survive to the untap. It's a big hope. Top card is a Mountain. 8 lands in play for Harlan.
I mean, there's certainly a point where just blowing up Experimental Frenzy and having 2 lightning strikes for the Lyra is probably going to be good enough.
If he has that, I would think that's what he's going to play here. I mean, he might at this point have another Frenzy in his hand, too. Mm-hmm. And sacrifices the Frenzy. He may now cast cards from his hand again. And there are a lot of them. Edgar checking, no jump start there. And Harlan actually just casts Rekindling Phoenix. That is an underwhelming turn.
Well, it looks like he just has a bunch of lands and creatures for the most part.
Discards 2 mountains to hand size. Edgar will get to untap with Lyra Dawnbringer.
And Azcanta the Sunken Ruin.
This might be good.
Was that a Vraska's Contempt off the top?
Okay.
That's so good against this Phoenix.
Yeah, that is the draw. He's going to activate Azcanta, and Edgar might still be in this.
What a game.
He certainly is in it. He might be ahead.
Yeah, what a game. Harlan's played really well, and he's up, 10 cards between Frenzy and Risk Factor, but Lyra is just such a stone wall.
Yeah, I mean, we mentioned that Edgar couldn't compete on number of cards, but the way he could maybe compete is what the actual cards are. And Lyra Dawnbringer is a card that can do that as he finds Kaya. Swings in for 5, Edgar up to 14, Harlan down to 15.
Kaya's another card advantage engine, sort of, in that it answers burn spells in its own way. And there's even a point where it lets you use traditional removal spells on Phoenix, because then you can roll her up and exile Phoenixes from the graveyard, so the eggs don't have anything to get back.
Yeah, Kaya Orzhov Usurper. So +1, exile up to 2 cards from a single graveyard. You gain 2 life if at least 1 creature was exiled this way.
Phoenix, light up the stage. That's 1 creature.
Edgar up to 16, contempts the Phoenix up to 18. That's certainly enough life points.
This is what we call a swing.
Yeah. Makes me wonder whether Harlan has another Frenzy. Without another Frenzy, I don't know if he'll get enough cards to come back from here.
Yeah, remember a moment ago, Edgar was at, what, 5?
Yeah.
Something, a virtual 5 or something to that effect?
Viashino Pyromancer sends Edgar back down to 16. Light up the stage with Spectacle. Here's Runaway Steamkin and Wizard's Lightning.
Well, honestly, Runaway Steamkin's a way to let Harlan maybe just cast all the cards in his hand.
Sure, it means he'll be extending into cards like Kaya's Wrath, but he's got to get Lyra off the board.
Yeah, the longer this goes, it's an awkward squeeze where do you want give your opponents outs to things like Kaya's Wrath, or do you want to give them more activations on their Azcanta,
right,
which is only going to make them more likely to be able to 1-for-1 all of your threats.
So Runaway Steamkin will be the first card he casts. That basically makes all his spells 1 cheaper. Edgar taking a look at the cards off in exile. Chandra, actually just 4 mana. He's leaving his cards in exile. It's going to be Chandra Fire Artisan. +1, gives him a land.
Chandra's worth a bunch of damage.
Attacks down the Kaya. Kaya's gone, sends 1 damage at Edgar. Edgar to 15. Lyra is unanswered, however, so if Edgar wants to, he can attack the Chandra. I suppose then the Lyra will be hit back.
It won't go after the Lyra, but it will negate the life gain
it'll get them
from
life
Lyra,
gain,
which is a big, big deal here.
Yeah. Another Pyromancer. Edgar to 13. But we go back to his turn. Immediately he activates Azcanta. Can he find a Kaya's Wrath? No, not yet, but he can find Teferi Time Raveler. Lyra attacks down the Planeswalker.
That's a way to give your Lyra vigilance.
Just bounce it and recast. Here's Teferi, and that's what he'll do. -1, draws a card, picks up Lyra. 5th land, recasts Lyra, says go.
No big deal. Activate Azcanta, cast Planeswalker, recast my 5-drop.
Harlan draws another Risk Factor. Not a bad draw here, all things considered.
Yeah, he can even cast both halves of it this turn. And that's a tough squeeze, because you know you're going to get at least 3 cards of it just based on all the creatures you have in play.
So, Harlan starting off with Runaway Steamkin. Now 3 mana for Risk Factor, puts counter on the Steamkin. Edgar's at 13. Which way does he want to go? Maybe he'll take the damage.
It doesn't feel good, but when this Wizard's Lightning is exiled, how much can you take off of these Risk Factors when you know that's going to happen?
Yeah, you take 8. That's a lot. You'd be down to 5. Wizard's Lightning puts you down to 2, and then there'd be 3 counters on the Steamkin. You'd be dead to a burn spell. That's a really risky place to be.
Yeah, and you're also, this Lyra's worth a lot if it gets blocked, but you're still going to net 2 life loss.
Here's what Edgar's counting. So he's at 13, right? If he takes both halves of the Risk Factor, he's down to 5. He takes the Wizard's Lightning, he's down to 2, and now he's thinking, okay, he blocks the Pyromancer, he'd go up to 7, but he's counting that unblocked damage. Hey, that's 7, which means that's not going to work. He's going to have to find another way. 2 Lava Runners from Harlan and a swing. That's the way Harlan... I think Harlan's countered this the way he moved.
Yeah, and look, he's dead because if you block with the Lyra, you just Wizard's Lightning whatever the Lyra blocks. And that's extra
And he knows
damage.
it. Yeah, Edgar extends the hand. Harlan saves the burn spell. A really nice tactic found, and 2-0, Harlan Fear picks up the win.
What a game.